Hey, my name is Brooke Ames. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and licensed drug and alcohol counselor in Jersey, Delaware, and Florida. I wanted to take a second to talk about boundaries. A lot of times, boundaries is like this word that we throw around on social media that we talk about with our friends sometimes, but like, what is a boundary? What does it mean to set a boundary? And what are they? Because they look different in every one of our relationships. A lot of times people are hesitant to set boundaries in their relationships because they feel if we are to set a boundary in a relationship, it will be upsetting to the person on the other end of that. So in our personal lives, if I set a boundary, maybe it will upset the person on the other end. Maybe it will hurt their feelings. Maybe it will cause disagreement or conflict. And therefore, I'm going to shy away from setting the boundary so that I don't cause any harm. In work, that can look like maybe I'm at risk of my boss not liking me as much. Maybe I'm at risk of not being accepted. Maybe I'm at risk of even being let go if I don't function the way that they're asking me to function, if I start to implement boundaries and say no to certain things or protect my personal time. So those are the reasons why we might shy away from setting boundaries. A lot of times what I talk to people about and what people don't know is that boundaries preserve and protect the relationships that are most meaningful to us. Well, if it causes conflict, how could it preserve the relationship that's most meaningful to me? Let's talk about that for a second. So, work is work. I don't know if it preserves anything with work, but it protects your personal time. So that's why you definitely set boundaries at work. You are absolutely replaceable there. You need to set boundaries to protect your time with yourself, with your family, for your own hobbies and interests. Boundaries at work look like I am leaving at this time. I'm going home. I'm not going to be available. With some jobs, you have to be available. You have to be on call. If you don't have to be, then I'm not going to be. If I'm not being compensated for this, if it's not lumped into my salary in any way, like I'm not doing this. I'm not staying here all the time. I'm not neglecting myself, my personal life, my personal relationships for this job. With our personal relationships, let's talk about that for a second. So let's say every time I hang out with this friend, they're experiencing extreme anxiety. And as a result of that, I'm experiencing extreme anxiety when I'm with them. It's causing my mental health to be, I wouldn't like harmed in some kind of way, like affected in some kind of way, right? It's not the best situation for us. So I recognize I need to set boundaries in this relationship because continuing to hang out with this person is not making me feel good. That might look like, what is a boundary? What does it look like in this relationship? It might look like distancing myself, not always being available, not always answering the phone, but still being a respectful friend. When this friend calls me, maybe I recognize I'm not in the best headspace to answer the phone, but I can shoot them a text and let them know, hey, I got your call. I'll call you back tomorrow. And then make sure I'm grounded and ready for that phone call, knowing what it is on the other side of it. What do boundaries look like in my relationship with my parents, right? Maybe I don't want my child to have sugar. And so a boundary that I explained to my mom is that like, hey, mom, the baby's not having sugar at this time. What if mom continues to give the baby sugar and doesn't respect my wishes? This comes up a lot, right? Then it's up to me to reiterate that boundary. If mom continues to disrespect this boundary, it's up to me to decide, like, is this something that I'm going to continue signing up for or not? What does a boundary look like in my relationship with my significant other? Same kind of concept, right? So maybe it's like my boundary with my partner is it's unacceptable for you to speak to me like that in our relationship. I voice that. They can either respect that or not. If they continue to disrespect that, again, it's up to me to decide what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. It's up to me to decide how much grace I'm willing to give and what I'm willing to put up with or not. What feels good for me, right? And that's really ultimately the purpose of boundaries. That's why we're setting them, so that we continue to preserve and protect the relationships that mean the most to us. We continue to engage in these relationships that mean the most to us while protecting our mental health first. If we're not protecting our mental health first, we are at risk of causing harm in these relationships that mean the most to us. What if I'm too nervous to set a boundary with my partner? Well, they're going to continue to behave that way because they don't know that it's bothersome to us. What's going to happen to me if they continue to behave that way? I'm most likely going to start to become irritated. I'm going to start to become resentful. Maybe I start to become like passive aggressive in my communication with my partner. That negative energy is going to radiate from me, even if I'm not using my voice to say it out loud. That will have a negative effect on our relationship. Yes, it definitely will. Even if we're not using our voice to say it, it will impact it. What about the relationship with our mom? What if I don't set the boundary there? We're going to continue to be frustrated when the baby comes home all hopped up on sugar, right? Like, that's not going to be a good situation to us if we can't get the baby to sleep because mom decides that sugar's not a problem. So it's important to us to use our voice in these relationships so we protect our mental health first and we protect our peace, really, because when we're using our voice, we put it on the other person to decide what they're going to do with that. Are they going to respect our boundaries or not? Using our voice and setting the boundary is doing our part in the relationship. When we've done that, we know we did 150% our part to try to preserve the relationship. If it's not met on the other side, powerless over that. Nothing we can do. Relationships take two sides, right? The other person has to show up. If they're not willing, they're not willing. We're powerless over that. Grief will come up. We can process that in therapy because that's painful. Even if we decide this is in our best interest to not engage in this relationship, grief will come up there. I wanted to say something else about boundaries and now I can't remember. Do boundaries need to be voiced or not? Do I always need to tell the person I'm setting a boundary or not? No. If we don't need to tell the other person that we're setting a boundary, like the first situation with our friend, I don't need to explain to them like, yo, you give me anxiety, like I can't participate in this every single day. That will probably cause harm, hurt their feelings, probably increase their anxiety. So I'm not going to say to them that I'm setting the boundary. I'm just going to know for myself that I'm setting this boundary and behave in this way in the most respectful way. Still communicate with them, still give them a timeline on when I'm going to get back to them. Hey, can't answer the phone right now. I'll get back to you at this time. I'm still going to show up and be a good friend. I'm going to protect my mental health first. In this situation with mom, I have to use my voice. I have to say that boundary out loud, and I might get put in a spot where I have to continue to say that boundary out loud, which is uncomfortable, but also the most important piece of boundaries is consistency. So some boundaries we need to use our voice, like the situation with our partner too. I have to tell them. I have to be transparent, use my voice. Some boundaries I have to use my voice. I have to tell the person that I'm setting the boundary. I have to be transparent and tell them how I feel. With other boundaries, I don't necessarily have to say anything at all. I just know for myself this is what I'm doing to protect my mental health, and I'm still going to show up and do my part in the relationship, even though I'm taking my mental health into consideration first. So that is how boundaries preserve the relationships that are most important to us. Really, they protect our relationship with ourselves, they protect our mental health, and most importantly, they protect our peace, and then allow us to show up as our best self in these relationships that are most meaningful to us. So I hope this was helpful in describing what is a boundary, does it need to be said or not, how do I implement it. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or DM me or comment on here, and I'll be sure to get back to you.